Good evening and greetings of peace. My name is Yusuf Ismail and the program you're watching is I Beg to Differ. This program focuses on interactive debate on socio-economic, political, cultural and religious issues affecting us as South Africans, and certainly looking, unpacking and examining some of the global dominant trends in the international community. Over the past week, we've heard a great degree of discussions within the mainstream media about the fact that metered taxi associations in Durban have launched an e-hailing service that they hope will compete with Uber and of course Bolt. The Mercury reported that the competitor started operations on early Tuesday morning as drivers associated with the new so-called formed Yo Taxi took to the streets of Durban, providing an alternative to Uber and the existing Bolt. The story goes, and the discussion actually is permeating throughout the mainstream media, that these particular taxi drivers and companies have engaged in threats of violence and attack against commuters who are engaging in using the service of Uber and indeed against Uber. Well, to join us in the studios to discuss this particular issue that is apparently affecting some of the commuters in Durban, we're joined by Santosh Singh, Lucas Taba, and of course Mbongeni Mkhize. All three are in fact owning their own taxi associations and are the directors of this newly formed company called Yo Taxi. Welcome to all three of you to I Beg to Differ. Let me start off with you, Santosh. And there's so many issues to unpack around this particular aspect. You are a director, you are a shareholder of this newly formed institute, this company called Yo Taxi. What's Yo Taxi? What does it stand for?
Yo Taxi is our trading name. It was just a form of Yo Taxi.
Okay.
So that's how the name came about.
So, and as I see, this is, as I understand, going to be an alternative to Uber, which obviously has been around in existence for what I think the past decade or the past couple of years.
Just under a decade.
Just to explain and unpack the issue. Uber is basically an app. It's an app service that is registered with a company internationally, and effectively individuals and commuters can download this app and they effectively use the services of individuals who are drivers purportedly for Uber. What's your concerns in terms of this entire enterprise as how it's and unraveled over the past couple of years?
As you say, it's an app. We refer to it as an e-hailing service. The difference between the past, which was called hailing, and after the new amendment bill will be e-hailing, the E part stands for electronic. Electronic
hailing, calling of taxis, calling of transportation.
So previously you would use your hard line.
Yeah.
And you would call a call center, and a call center will route a taxi to your destination. E-hailing is now via an app electronically to your destination.
Now, just before we came in, you did express, and that's why, and unfortunately we haven't got someone from Uber to unpack their position from us, but you did raise some concerns from a legal perspective, the fact that there's a bill that's been passed and that there are certain legal concerns that you believe that Uber and their drivers and the association is obviously not meeting in terms of certain legal requirements. Just unpack the negativity surrounding that.
Yo Taxi stemmed from the concern about the abuse of the Uber app, that it was available to just about anybody from the private sector, whereby we then found people are downloading the apps onto their systems, becoming Uber partners, and then they are then touting.
Well, you said people are downloading the app, meaning the app is easily available. Any person from the street can download the app, and when you say he becomes a partner, he then can set up his own vehicle and portray himself as an Uber driver. Is that what you're saying?
There are a few requirements, but the biggest requirement is not met.
Which is?
Which is having a license, an operator's license. In our National Land Transport Act, it's Section 50, which is basically any vehicle traveling on a South African road for public transport for reward must have an operator's license.
Are you saying that these vehicles driven by private individuals operating under the auspices of Uber do not have the operating licenses?
I wouldn't say all of them, but I would say a good 95%.
And where do you come with that? 95% is a significant figure.
You have your your current meter taxi industry, and none of them are really affiliated to Uber, and that then takes you out of the rest of the 12,000 that Uber claims that they have, which out of the 12,000, I doubt there's very many that have operators licenses, as none of the cities or municipalities are actually granting these guys licenses. So if they were to say that they do have licenses, it will be a question as to where did they obtain those licenses from.
Okay, now just explain the background. I'm going to bring you in, Lucas. As I understand, all three of you here are you owners of fleets of taxis? So all of you own fleets of taxis, would I be correct? Yes. This transition to this Yo Taxi, was it purely because of this concern, or alternatively the fact that you saw this as a means of, which is obviously legitimate, you can compete with Uber and provide an alternative in terms of, this is an opportunity, a business opportunity in a broad sense. Lucas?
No, in fact, how we started this Your Taxi, we were 8 associations in our region, that is Durban Central, where we felt that on peak hours, we didn't experience that problem. When the peak hours finish, then we experience the problem of we don't get our passengers on bus stops where we used to pick up.
All right.
Then when we do a survey, we find that there are cars that are picking those passengers. And when we look at that, those cars, we find that it was all these behaving what you call cars that they were taking people because they introduced cash.
Okay, now I want to bring something for your attention. The Mercury reported this was a taxi owner apparently told reporter Sakiseni Komalo from the Mercury, and this was reported I think on Wednesday or Tuesday, that the association members, and obviously there are 12, as I understand it, 12 meter taxi associations that have now formed this e-hailing system called Yo Taxi. But the report was that
12 minibus.
The 12 minibus taxi associations. Yes. Okay. The report goes is that apparently one of the owners stated, tell your owners to come and join and put their cars under Yo Taxi so that they can be safe. This is our job and it belongs to the taxi industry. Now clearly, I mean, in that particular statement is a veiled threat of some sort or the other. Whether it is meant in that fashion or not, but clearly, I mean, you can see that, taking into account the fact that KwaZulu-Natal is notorious, absolutely notorious for its level of taxi violence. I don't think there's a disagreement on that particular issue. And this can be seen as a veiled threat. What's your comment on that, Lucas?
In fact, we got drivers that are driving those cars.
Yeah.
And most of us, we are not on the road. What goes on the road, changing words between the Uber, I would say the Uber drivers and our drivers, then that is where they use taxi industry as, what the taxi industry is about.
You're talking about Uber and
yes,
Bolt.
Yes.
But I mean, the comment was as follows. This is what the guy says. We have no intention of using force. He puts a disclaimer. But will not allow our operations, meaning the general conventional taxi operations, and of course now under Yo Taxi, to be bulldozed by illegal operators and European giants that abuse their powers. And no one doubts the fact that Europeans and you've got these multinationals coming and taking over business and industry. But what's the implications from this? This can lead to potential violence in KZN.
Yes, that can lead to violence, but we have to go as the directors of the Yo Taxi and do check our guys that are on the ground, that how they can say something like that, because our aim is not to fight. Our aim is to compete, because our Yo Taxi app is complying with with the government. We got permits, what the government need when we are in the business of transport. You need to have your own operating license to do the job.
Mbongeni, is that the case, based on what Lucas said, that because I mean, taxis don't have a good reputation, not just in KZN, but in South Africa. They've got a bad, and when you talk about breaking the law, going on pavements, being stopped by Metro Police and so on and so forth, is this critique against Uber and both for that particular matter legitimate in the sense that a lot of taxi operators do not operate under necessary roadworthy conditions and indeed the legislations that we see in this particular country.
Okay, Yusuf, maybe let me just go back a bit.
Sure.
Yeah. You spoke about violence. Before we get into that, you spoke about violence, that there have been threats and all that about violence, that when we come in, we were going to start violence and all that. But I think we started working on Monday.
Yeah.
Today is Saturday.
Who was this individual? I don't know, it's not identified, but apparently the individual in the video that has purportedly gone viral on social media, he says it's apparently a Yo Taxi owner. Who was that individual?
Well, I wouldn't comment.
It's reported in the Mercury, no name has been given. I haven't had sight, unfortunately, for the video itself, but the individual is apparently telling them, this is our job, it belongs to the taxi industry. And this is the media that's been going on WhatsApp. You don't have any...
Yusuf, I
Yeah.
would... Sorry.
Okay. Okay, you can.
Go ahead.
I would think in regards to some of the clips that are coming across, what they're not mentioning is the full context of it, whereby our operators have been approached between 50 to 200 Uber or e-hailing drivers at a time. So they're not mentioning in terms of the pressure that they put in terms of intimidation onto the owners.
Okay.
They're just mentioning the comment of the owner, but they're not mentioning that the owner is being put under pressure under those comments or for those comments to come out. We had the incident last week whereby initially it was 150 Uber drivers that got together and attempted to blockade our vehicles in. It ended up at going to a nearby ground. SAP and Metro intervened and that was resolved temporarily. The following morning, there was close on to I think 200 to 250 e-hailing drivers that got together, and they caused quite a bit of chaos through Durban streets. They were blocking intersections, hooting and doing whatever you want to, and eventually they ended up at Musgrave where they were dispersed by Metro and SAP. I think 3 vehicles were impounded and about 50 people were charged.
Okay. 50 people were charged.
Yes. Right, we're not too sure what the charges were, but our vehicles continue to operate there as we were still within our bounds in terms of the law.
And these vehicles that you are now operating are just ordinary meter taxis, are they? They're just ordinary vehicles, right? They're not minibus taxis.
Nope.
They
are normal sedan, 4-seater,
sedan, 4-seater, for 2 or 3 people at a time.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I just want you guys to hold that thought. We just have to go for a quick ad break, and when we're back, we'll continue this discussion. We'll see you shortly. Welcome back to our Beg to Differ, and if you've joined us, we are discussing the ongoing debacle between a newly formed app called Yo Taxi and of course the shenanigans that's been reported in the mainstream media on Uber and Bolt. Mungeni, just quickly, this industry, when we talk about industry regulation, there is, as it stands, an inherently large amount of conflict amongst people within the taxi business. One of the key issues, and maybe it may be too early for me to bring this in, but I think I need to, because it's such a critical component. The fact of the matter is that the concern is that the Taxi Association, not just the KZN Taxi Association, but in South Africa in general, is riddled with organized criminal syndicates that are basically operating these specific associations. Would I be correct on that?
Well, I wouldn't talk for everyone, but in our Durban Central and in the region that we are in, and even in Durban, I wouldn't say I know of any. I know of people who are just operating, just normal businessmen who do their business.
And these businessmen, in your opinion, have had no involvement with organized crime?
Well, as I said, I wouldn't comment on everyone. Some of them have had that, but I think the majority of the guys and the ladies were in the...
Lucas, what's your position? Your surname, Qaba. Yes. You've heard of the Qabas. Any relation with the Qabas in the KZN? But I mean, you know, just a few, and this is just a few months ago, I come from the Ikopo area, and you may have heard this, you may not have heard this. A leading taxi owner from the Ikopo area that operates in Ikopo, Amzimkulu, was shot dead in Pinetown. A personal associate of mine, friend's a noted police captain in Ikopo, Mr. Makari Madondo. I don't know if you heard of that. 6 bullets shot down on the streets of Pinetown, and the argumentation was that this basically had to do with utilization of routes, threats of stealing particular routes by certain taxi associations. I mean, that is a critical issue. The violence in KZN has reached endemic levels within the taxi association.
Yeah,
You've heard of that issue. You've heard of the issue. He was shot dead, 6 bullets on the streets whilst coming to Durban, and it was a dispute. I'm not so sure about the underlying details, but it was clearly a
If I
dispute.
could come in there, Yusuf. I'm not saying there are people that may not have had a previous criminal record. But currently, where we stand, and currently with the Department of Transport, on our forms, there's a declaration there that needs to be signed and stamped off by SAP. So, whatever you might have done in the past, if you've done your time in it, and you've straightened yourself up, and your declaration is accepted by SAP and Department of Transport, you kind of moved away from
No,
it.
of course, that is acceptable. I
But
have no
coming back
problem with that.
to what you said, and if I heard correctly, the guy that was shot was actually a policeman.
No, not a policeman. His brother's he's a police captain, but he
Oh,
was
okay.
a taxi owner.
Fine.
But involved purportedly also in taxi violence.
And sometimes those are the issues, the underlying issues that we find law enforcement in places that they should not be, and they start making biased decisions. And then you have the criminal element that hangs around.
But what's the cause, and what's the cause of taxi violence? I mean, the associations surely need to, I mean, the thing is, in many instances I see, a lot of the drivers, the drivers, there's more than just simply the drivers being involved in violence. It goes at a far more higher level. I mean, it's one association competing for turf and terrain with another association, just simply like how these tow truck drivers operate. I mean, that's also another industry where violence and the assault and shooting is pretty common. There has to be some rationale behind this ongoing violence, which has been going on for more than a decade.
I'd like to comment, but my field of speciality is here in Durban Central. And
Sure.
if you look at our Durban Central with 21 associations, I mean, in my association, we've never lost a member to taxi violence. My colleagues.
So you're part of the KZN, is it the Durban Associate? Durban, what's the body that you operate?
You have eThekwini,
Yeah.
which is broken down into 5 regions. So we fall as Durban Central. We govern basically by boundaries, which is your Mgeni River, your Reservoir Hills, as far as Oswent. So those are our associations and our associations of
And there's been
operation.
no aspects of violence surrounding that, nothing whatsoever that you can
Not
remember?
related directly to any of those associations.
Related to what?
You've had incidents taking place maybe in Durban with somebody from the outskirts coming in, but it's not something that we can put a finger on and say we know what's going on because it's related to a conflict between myself and Overport.
Is the problem at a fundamental level the drivers or the taxi bosses?
No.
Well, what would you, I mean,
Say it again.
is there a problem at a fundamental level? I'm not dealing with you individually, but I'm saying at a general level, with taxi bosses or with minions and soldiers and the so-called drivers?
Yusuf, it goes far beyond that, where you find, if you dig into some of the violence that has taken place. Like I say, we're not equipped to
Sure. You're not an investigator
into
yourself.
each thing.
But I mean,
But
you are
would
involved in
find-
an industry.
You would find that sometimes a taxi operator is also a tow truck operator. He's killing, or
When you say an operator, an owner,
a tow truck owner, operates a fleet of tow trucks. You would find that his issue is totally different from a taxi operator. It's got something to do with his business as a towing operator, as an example. But because he's from the taxi industry, everybody associates with the taxi industry. You'd find sometimes guys have personal issues, and their death results from a personal squabble. But because he's a taxi operator, is branded
there's a
as-
nexus between the taxi
So-
industry and what you
because
see
the
here.
taxi industry, as you said previously, has a history of violence.
Yeah.
People look at everybody in that light. And that's one of the difficulties that we're having, is that we've actually gotten together as businessmen and we've put something genuine on the table as a business proposal and a business way of moving forward.
And what is that?
The Yo Taxi,
The Yo Taxi, which is the alternative to what you already see.
which is an alternative, but make no mistake, it is fully funded and it is fully a South African grown app.
Let me bring you in, Lucas. I mean, just to take this further, you have a fleet of taxis going to the Ntuzuma area. I suddenly pitch up and I start my own particular transportation services, and I use the same lane and the same terrain that these taxis operate, albeit not at the same metered taxi stop. But I start picking up commuters. That's going to end up where the individual driver is going to be in a pretty sticky end, would I be correct? It's going to be resolved through violence one way or the other. There's going to be no report necessarily to the police, but that individual is going to find himself in significant problems.
No, you're talking about the minibus or
The minibus taxi. I mean, you guys are involved with the minibus taxi, as I understand.
Yes. If you say you can wake up in the morning and say you want to operate from here to Ntuzuma. I'm just giving an example.
Yeah.
First of all, you have to do your application with the Department of Transport, and you have to get a letter that recommends your application from our municipality.
Yeah.
And the association that you want to go and work with, they must give you a recommendation letter too. Like if you are from Durban, you want to go to Ntuzuma, you must have a letter from Ntuzuma that they recommend you what to call your services. Rather than that, you won't get that.
But the thing is that it's resolved through violence. These kind of incidents are resolved. I mean, I'm just going to give you something. Firstly, I mean, I'm going to bring in the taxi violence this year in KZN. What's your position on that?
Okay, Yusuf, I wouldn't really comment on the whole of KZN. But in Durban Central, as my colleague has said, we've had a very, very, very low number of incidents of taxi violence. So,
well, in the CBD, I haven't seen, and personally, but the outlying areas are problematic. I mean, I just looked at a report here since the beginning of this year, in places like Shakaskraal, that's pretty far, Tongaat, Mobeni is around the corner, Verulam, that's around the corner, KwaMashu around the corner, and Mandeni, 7 taxi bosses have been killed. One of the province's worst incidents took place in July last year, when apparently 12 taxi drivers were massacred in the R74 in Colenso. More than 250 bullets were fired during the ambush. The latest, there was a recent taxi-related shooting in Mandeni where 4 minibus taxis and 2 cars were burnt alive. They burnt alight, their fuel tanks ignited during a 40-minute gun battle at a taxi rank on Monday night. Now, I get the point. In fact, the police on the scene found something like 500 spent cartridges were recovered, and it's believed that the shooting was linked to another one, and the murder of a taxi owner. His name was Siya Mbonambi. I don't know if you know of him, Siya Mbonambi, of some weeks back. But the problem is that the atmosphere surrounding this, and what you read here is clearly, as you pointed out earlier, you're acknowledging the fact that it's violence, but you're saying that the violence is incidental. In other words, the fact that he may be related to the taxi is just simply coincidental. But from what I can gather here, if it's 7 taxi bosses killed in the spate of a year in diverse areas, people being massacred, I mean, it seems to be that there's something fundamentally wrong within the taxi industry, and people are now afraid. I mean, surely at the Taxi Association of KZN, some sort of steps need to be taken into cognizance. Santosh?
Yusuf, if you look at that in the 7 taxis and all the stats that you've given, and a 40-minute shootout and stuff like that. 40-minute shootout, police should have been there within 10 minutes.
But they weren't. They were not there. They were not there.
It gives you answers
the problem is the police are also afraid. Some of them are afraid to even come to these scenes.
That's where it stems from, because it comes back down to legislation. If there's legislation in place, it needs to be enforced. And if you are not enforcing it, some guys are going to end up taking the law into their own hands.
But that's basically what happened.
And that is why, Yusuf, coming back to where we are, what we've started is something based on legislation.
Yeah. which should be commended.
So in terms of being from that industry, we're making a step ahead, and our operation runs on legality. So all that is happening, I can't deny it that it's happening. But our train
But
of
you deny
thought,
the fact that, sorry to interrupt you, but you deny the fact that it does have something to do with the taxi industry. It's not the fact that individuals are coincidentally part of the taxi industry and then somehow the other involved in violence, that it has to do with something within the taxi industry.
Yusuf, it won't be fair for me to answer that because I don't know these guys personally.
Okay.
And I wouldn't know what are the other links. It could be drug related, it could be wife related, it could be other business related, it could be people they're owing money to, it could be pure taxi business related to. But I wouldn't know because I'm not from those sectors.
I appreciate that, but I just want to point out KwaZulu-Natal Violence Monitor Mary De Haas. She points out places like obviously Mandeni, Kwadakuza, Kranskop, Mapumulo, Ladysmith, Escort were known as hotspots for taxi violence. But she says that in recent years, and we spoke about the CBD, taxi violence and conflict has flared up around Durban, more particularly in the outer west areas of the city. Whereabout is that?
Outer West would put you probably into the Hammersdale, Cato Ridge kind of
Cato
area.
Ridge, Cato Manor, Camperdown, those particular areas. Are you aware of the fact, Lucas, whether a task team that was apparently appointed to investigate the industry or investigate the particular violence, whether any, I have not seen to date any arrests of note, of significance, or any any convictions by any court on this particular issue?
On this, in fact, we got people that they are working on the law section. If our judiciary are not speeding up any crime to bring them in courts, we can't do nothing as a taxi industry, because like my colleagues are saying, our Durban Central Region Association, it's like how can I put it?
Is there any political will? Because there seems to be a total lack of political will, and this was the former Major General Johan Boysen stated there's no political will to even look at some of the underlying causes. And I know I'm asking you guys to give me the causes, but it seems to me that our politicians, law enforcement officials, are not dealing with this with any kind of urgency. And I mean, it's not just simply deteriorating, it's being amplified over the years, more so. And this is, everybody knows about what's going on. Mbongeni?
Let me get in that one, Yusuf. You see, I appreciate the fact that you mentioned that one. The real reason why we came here was to talk about your taxi. And one of the things that Santosh mentioned is that before we formed this company, before we started operating, we made sure that our paperwork was okay. It was all right. It was in line with all the laws of the country governing the taxi industry. So one of the reasons which cause such things to happen is when people decide to go and work without having the proper documentation and going to other people's routes, not going under the umbrella of the law and doing all the things that...
So in other words, permits should be given and specific routes should be maintained. And the problem is, due to greed, people are not following those specific routes, they're going to other routes.
Exactly.
So that is, would that be one of the main causes for the violence? People are taking other people's routes.
It's one of the causes which if not corrected, because as we sit here, we are talking about Uber, Taxify, and your taxi and the other e-hailing services. You see, what we did is we went and we got our paperwork in order. But if our government and on everyone who's involved, law enforcement, everyone, do not take care or do not do their proper job, like for instance, as we mentioned, we have vehicles which do have permits, right? And then Uber has about 5,000, that's what I heard, about 5,000 vehicles in KZN.
Not all of them have got the legal permits.
I wouldn't say all of them, but I can say about 90% of them don't have that. So if you just look at that, we have about 90% of people who are operating on the road without proper documentation. And then here is your taxi coming in with the proper documentation. Don't you think that at some point there will be conflicts in that thing? Because
Inevitably.
yeah.
But let's hold that thought, and all of you to hold that thought. We're going for an ad break. We're going to be back shortly and continue this. Welcome back to I Beg to Differ, and joined us, we are discussing, I'm in the studios with three directors of the newly formed Yo Taxi, and who also own their own fleet of, would I be correct or would it be offensive to describe you as taxi bosses? Because the term taxi bosses has quite a negative connotation. Just what Mbongeni said, and you said the same thing. You said 95% don't have permits. Where do you get the figures from?
We've done surveys before we actually got onto the road.
Yeah.
So just about every Uber, Taxify, and other e-hailing do not have permits. We've stopped drivers, we've inquired, not as Yo Taxi, just as a general inquiry, and that's what we found, is that most of them, or almost all of them, do not have permits. Let me go a step further. Before we've launched our pilot, we've been in contact with all the various SAP station commanders in the areas that we intend launching, notifying them of what we are doing, putting legislation onto the table for them, and providing them with copies of our permits. We've done that also with Metro and the different other authorities. So before we came on, we made sure everybody in terms of law understood what we were doing, so that we're not a new kid on the block who's just bullying our way through. And if they felt at any point what we were doing was wrong, there was sufficient time for them to advise us to say what we were doing was wrong, but we've done our homework and all our paper and documentation was in order. So our operation is 100% legal and we're on track.
The issue of the threats, and I think we need to come and deal with this, threats and extortion. Are you saying that's not happening? Because if I get someone from Uber, they're going to say it is happening. Who are we to believe? I mean, the vehicles belonging to Uber and Bolt, they participated in an illegal traffic jam on, was it Tuesday or Wednesday? But the reason for that, I know you are raising the concern that they're operating illegally. Is that the only issue, that they are concerned they're going to be put out of business by a legitimate entity?
If you can show me in the last week a single charge against any one of the Yo Taxi members, I would accept it that we're intimidating people. There are a whole lot of talks, but there is no single evidence that somebody can say that they were confronted and assaulted and whatever it might be to back up the intimidation.
The impounding and enforcing at Musgrave, apparently offending vehicles. Which were those vehicles that were impounded?
That was your e-hailing. It was not a...
Was it not Yo Taxi?
Not Yo Taxi.
So that was Uber.
It was, we can't tell you if it was Uber or Taxify or whatever, but it was one of the other e-hailing services.
Would you recommend the ordinary public, and maybe this may be unfair because I don't have a representative from Uber or Bolt for that matter, but why should I go with you as opposed to going with them because of the fact that you are law enforcement, law abiding, and they are not law abiding? Is that the underlying rationale that we have, Lucas?
No. We are not law enforcement.
No, law abiding.
Yes.
That's the point. Law abiding.
Yes.
That's the point I wanted to make.
You see, when we do our homework, as we said, we sit together. We are neighbors association. And we find that our piece of job is going by this so-called hailing, what to call people. And that is why we start this, and we said let's put our books in order. We had a meeting, if I recall, I think last year or early this year, when there was this no understanding on.
There's a miscommunication.
Yes. We went and had a meeting with, I think Mr. Kaunda was MEC.
He was the MEC for transport prior to becoming mayor.
People are used to this thing.
Of course.
Then he said to us, the best thing is to create our own app. what we did. But we make more what you call law on our one, because we said no, let's have the permits so that we mustn't have a problem when things goes well, and then they'll find out that they need permits. So our one is 100% by the law.
I want to bring in, and I think that from what I can gather and understand, I mean, it's a far more comfortable means of transportation as well. What's the average cost? How much do you pay? I mean, how?
7 rand per K.
It's 7 rand per kilometer,
And then it's a flat rate.
Yeah.
So there's no peak and off peak times altering the
And
price.
for a minibus taxi, what's the? I mean, I haven't traveled for some time. For an ordinary 15-seater Quantum or Toyota, how much?
Average is 10 rand per person.
10 rand per person, depending on the area. So if it's from Durban to Reservoir Hills, would it be 10 rand per person?
It's about, I think it's 11 if I'm not.
Has it gone to 11 rand?
So as I said, the average is around
Yeah.
10.
Now, just, this takes me back to the fact that it again brings us back to the whole issue of turf wars. I'm saying you guys seem to be law-abiding citizens. What's what's the nexus that you have as owners, not just partly directors of Yo Taxi, but certainly owners of fleets? All of you own fleets of taxis. Do you have commute meetings on a monthly basis? Is it the KZN Taxi Association? Would I be correct? Is that the kind of so-called overarching body regulating the taxi operations in KZN? Would I be correct? Is it the KZN Taxi Association?
You have two.
Yeah.
You have SANTACO, South African National Taxi Council.
Well, that's the National Taxi Association of South Africa.
It's national, and then it stems down to provincial, and then it steps down to
And
regional.
all of you, what body are you affiliated with?
We on SANTACO, like
Okay.
I said, Lucas is vice chairperson in the
You are the
region.
treasurer of Santaco, and
Not
Mbungeni,
SANTACO, the regional, the Durban
the
Central.
Durban regional aspect. And the point is that I just want to know, what steps have you taken in your capacity due to the kind of fierceness? There is a fierceness of competition. I mean, there's I would say, some would argue, an unregulated market, even though the fact is, you speak about ideally these laws that are there and have to be abided. But what are you doing with the fact that inevitably, and we're talking about this, and I seem to be seeing that some sort of lack of awareness, when you have mafia tactics, mafia-like tactics exhibited, what do you guys do to rein in associations or bosses who are basically abusing their positions? I understand the fact the law enforcement officials have a role to play, but certainly your role in capacity with SANTACO has a role to play in terms of bringing them to book to law enforcement officials.
In Durban Central, for example, within our 10-man executive, we have a committee or part committee that deals with conflict. So if it's brought to our attention that there are two conflicting parties within an association, or two associations that are conflicting, the relevant heads of the associations are brought in. It's brought to their attention what the complaints are. They asked to go and deal with those particular complaints. If they can't handle it themselves, we step in to assist with it. If failing that, we then involve province. If failing that, Department of Transport is brought in, where the individuals' permits can be cancelled and they can lose their operating rights. So there are steps in place as long as we are aware of what is taking place. But if things are taking place deep down where nobody seems to know about it, we have no idea.
What about things like anti-competitive price fixing, Lucas?
When you talk about
Well, I mean, the fact that you can't regulate, someone charges a certain, I mean, there's no fixed rate, as I understand. Is there a fixed rate?
Yeah,
Get in, Mugeni.
definitely there is a fixed rate. You see, as we talk of these 12 associations,
Yeah.
It didn't start as 12 associations. Maybe let me just go back a bit. It started with 5 associations, then going to 6 to 8. But the 5 associations that I'm talking about that maybe started this thing are neighboring associations. So every time that there's going to be a price increase or something, these neighboring associations come together and then they discuss that. On the 1st of July, let me make just an example. On the 1st of July, the money is supposed to increase by 1 rand. Are we increasing it?
Yeah.
And then we agree, yes, we are increasing it. No, we are not.
Collectively.
Yeah, collectively. So there won't be anyone who will come and charge 16 rands when we agreed
to charge 10 rands or 11 rands, whatever the case is. Just
And
for
that's
yep.
just to add on there, that's also in conjunction with your public as well. So if you take your public forums, we're consulting with them as well, that prices would go up compared to the fuel price, the maintenance cost, your tire prices, whatever else it is. So it's justified to the public first, it's accepted, and then we guys raise it.
These Toyota Quantum buses, are they a health hazard? Particularly when you find the fact that, I mean, they're supposedly 16 seaters. You know that's not the case. I mean, the average taxi, you go to, well, I mean, we spoke about earlier in the break on Commercial Road. You go, the average, I mean, they're congested. You've got sometimes 18, sometimes 20, sometimes 25 people. I mean, what happens in a situation like that?
I really don't understand that one, Yusuf. I'll tell you why. You are a fare-paying passenger. There's nobody, and I'm going to use the word of violence in terms of the gun, putting a gun to your head to jump into a 16-seater as passenger number 17, 18, 19, 20. I don't understand.
Yeah, but I mean, understandably, but people want to get home. So if, for example, you have a situation where your conductor tells people, Wozala, come inside, and the guys come in.
So you got to look at, not the taxi, you got to look at the mentality of the passenger. Because you are running the risk of getting in there. You want to get home early. You are the same guy who was studying and tells the taxi, stop here because I'm late for lectures. Later on in life, when you up and running, you're the same guy who's now driving behind the taxi and you're complaining, look at this guy, how he's stopping there. But you forgot the days when you wanted him to stop there because you were late for lectures. A lot of the things that the taxi drivers do is because of the pressure from the passengers.
So you're saying the passengers are determining how the taxi drivers are operating?
If you took a taxi every day and you knew that driver was a hazard to your health,
you wouldn't take it?
You wouldn't take it.
People take the risk, but at the end of the day, surely the taxi driver has a responsibility, and the association...
If you support something without complaining and you continually support it, you are not correct.
What's an association? Just clarify that for me and for the viewers out there. Taxi association, because this is 12-meter taxi associations. How many taxi associations are there in KZN?
KZN is way past.
Durban, the Durban area, Greater Durban area?
The eThekwini area is 112.
So, okay.
There's 5 regions. Durban Central is in charge of 21.
And an association is what? An individual that, just explain the association. What I seem to have some sort of ambiguity in terms of an association, fleet of taxis.
Can I come in?
Yeah.
The association is formed by members in that particular area. I'll just give you an example of my association, Overport. We call it Overport Taxi Association. It's a group of people that they were running the business there.
And they operate within that area.
They operate within that area.
But there could be different taxi fleets owned by different owners. And so there's a group of owners that come together and agree to form an association. Is that my understanding?
It's similar to the same thing. Because like my neighbor, both of them are my neighbors. That's why we are here. Because whatever we're doing together. Like my colleagues have said that if we increase the fare, we increase the fare, but we start have a meeting that, like you Chesterfield, you are how many kilometers from Chesterfield to CBD?
Yeah.
You'll cost so much. Me and him is Overport in Sydney. Always ours is like 1 rand different.
Okay.
It's coming from down Marco. I'm here on top.
All right. Yeah. Well, hold that thought, Lucas. We're going for an ad break and we'll be back for our final segment. And we'll see you shortly. Welcome back to I Beg to Differ, and if you've joined us, we are in our final segment discussing the newly formed Yo Taxi. Santosh, firstly, Yo Taxi, it's an app. Did you create? How was the app created? You were obviously instrumental in creating the app. It's available online. People just simply download it, similar to how they download Uda. How does it work?
Exactly as you explained it. It's available online, iStore, Play Store.
And this is only in the eThekwini region, right?
The pilot.
The pilots in eThekwini region.
You could sit in Cape Town and download it.
Yeah.
But you're not going to get a service.
Sure.
So the plan is at some point to go national, but like I said earlier, we're piloting it slow.
How many do you have?
Currently, we're sitting with about 80.
80 metered taxi permitted drivers.
Vehicles.
And I download it, and within and covering the region of eThekwini, as far afield as how far afield? Before the toll, after the toll?
Currently, because we're piloting, we're basically doing a 10K to 15K radius from the Musgrave area.
So it's from the Musgrave area and a 10 to 15K radius around
Which
that
basically
area.
keeps you within the Durban CBD.
And how long is this pilot project for?
In Musgrave, it's a week, and the following week we'll be moving to the Chesterville-Westville area.
What's the response been so far?
So far, we've had excellent response. There's been some negative stuff, but we expected that.
Yeah, of course, the negativity
Because
surrounding
of
your alternative
competition
competitors and the
stuff like
competition
that.
and so on.
But from the people who have actually taken the service, there's been a lot of 5-star ratings coming through in terms of a difference.
It's good in a way because at least, you know, Uber is it's a European-based company, and if this hits the ground, it will be a meaningful, effective alternative to a particular company with providing legitimate services to the South African public, many of whom are frustrated in traveling in minibus taxis. Would I be correct, Lucas? The concern is just the affordability. I mean, the average person in the living in the township, the most affordable means of transportation is, the reality is in a minibus taxi, not in a private meter taxi. This is probably going to be more for the upmarket, middle to higher income bracket individuals traveling from A to B.
Yeah, but let's make this thing straight. You keep on saying meter taxi, meter taxi.
Yeah.
There are meter taxi.
Yeah, meter taxi, the Yo Taxi, Yo Taxi.
Your taxi is the group of e-hailing, like Uber. In this, we felt that let's have this, what you call competition with them, because that was part of what you call of our business that was going. So we said, no, let's create this thing here and see how we're gonna do it.
Who's the brainchild behind the three of you? Is it you, Lucas, or Mbungeni?
Collective.
Collective.
Is it collective? So it's just the three of you collectively. There's more than three.
Not three of us.
Okay.
It's more than that.
And I would assume, Mbungeni, that this obviously required some degree of thought. It's been going on for a number of years. And I would also assume a certain amount of investment as well, which would be quite significant, I believe.
Yes. You see, this app that we created, it's funded by us. We have a partner who is an IT specialist. So it's us and him. So we didn't get any funding from the government. We didn't ask any funding from anywhere. We just funded it ourselves, and it's a South African brand. So yeah, that's it.
You see at some point in time that you will probably want to move away from the conventional minibus taxi industry and solely focus on Yo Taxi, depending on how it basically operates and how the response is from South Africans?
No. We won't run away from, or we won't move away from our minibus taxi, because there are people who are still in need of minibus taxi, because like you can see our economy is bad. And you find that people are not employed. And you know, people, they won't have, some of them, they won't have that money to take that, what to call the Yo Taxi. They like used to what to call to a minibus taxi. So we can't run away from that. That is the key business for us, where we saw that transport to us is like, you know, even I can see that thing even when my eyes are closed, that this business is on my head.
Remember, Yusuf, the city at the moment is in transformation of the Go Durban project. And the Go Durban project is to minimize smaller vehicles into the CBD. So the minibus would actually be upgraded to a bus fleet. So you would probably see the...
Are you saying the minibus taxi would be upgraded to a bus fleet?
To a bus fleet.
And you do away with the Toyota Quantums?
Once you do away, they would become a feeder service. So you would have your main...
Ancillary to your main...
Yes, so you'd have your main trunk routes with your much bigger vehicles coming into the CBD. And you'll need your feeders, because your buses are obviously not going to be able to do a door-to-door to get you to the trunk route. So your minibus will still play a very, very active role, but just a slightly different role.
How did you guys get into this industry? Starting with you, Santosh. Because, you know, speaking about it, this is something which I always, when I used to travel, and one of the drivers, I forget his name, years back, but operating in the Reservoir Hills area, a colored gentleman, told me it's an industry that he was forced to get inside, but it's dangerous, telling me that. Is it a difficulty for the average South African public with some degree of effort to enter this industry and be part and parcel of it, or does he face a meaningful array of uphill challenges that he'll have to overcome?
I think it's down to the individual. I mean, I came from a transport background, and
but I mean, it's fairly new. This is from the 80s, right? The 1990s, when this whole concept of transportation transformed the landscape of South Africa. In the past, people were just traveling via buses.
yeah, well, I came from that bus background.
You came from the bus background.
And I studied. I didn't go into the profession that I studied. I got into the fuel business, and I saw a relationship between the minibus and the fuel. And I got into the fuel. I played by the rules, and today I'm sitting with the fleet. So I think it's down to the individual and what they prepare to put into it. Because I used to get up at 3 in the morning before to make sure that I picked my drivers up and got them to the vehicles. Because if you are the service provider,
you have to show a degree of commitment.
how would you get your drivers to that point if you are the service provider? So if you prepare to do all those kind of things, you would see yourself growing.
And you, Lucas?
My history in this industry is a long.
Well, I don't want to pry too much, but just briefly, I mean, collectively, how many taxis do you guys own?
Between the three of us?
Between the three of you. I mean, you obviously own a range of taxis, fleet of taxis, and of course, now with your taxi, you're looking at collectively 80 vehicles, was it 80 vehicles?
We could match that with the minibuses.
You could match that with the minibus, so it's equivalent in a sense. What's your advice to the public out there who are basically getting this kind of negativity? Because at the end of the day, it's going to impact them. They're getting conflicting reports, and like I stated, unfortunately, we've got no representative from Uber, so we can't provide that alternative information. But hearing this, seeing videos in the Buria Mail, taxi drivers cause havoc in Musgrave, Yo Taxi versus Uber, and so on and so forth. How should the public react?
I think in this, they must feel free. They are safe in our transport. Because when you take your taxi, you'll be 100% safe, because our cars have got cameras that are viewed by our call centers. And you can download what you call a website and give your child. Your child will monitor what you call the vehicle that is you are in until you reach your destination.
And Mangeni, last comments?
Yeah, I will also add to what the guys have said. I won't really say much about what people should and should not do. I mean, in the past week, we've done our pilot, we've done our work.
Do you believe it's successful? It's been
we
successful?
believe it's successful for the whole week. So in terms of violence and everything, I'm sure that they've had anything. They've had nothing of that sort.
And nobody's been criminally charged to date.
Exactly. And the other thing that I need to correct Yusuf is this. You see in the news, sometimes they just twist the things and say what is not true. You see what they said, they posted our picture that there's been havoc with your taxi and all that. We blocked the road. We never blocked any road. We were right there standing in the Musgrave area, and the Uber, Taxify, or whoever other app decided to come and block the road, but we never blocked any road. You can even see, as Santosh did mention, that there are cases that have been opened. There's not one driver or owner from your taxi who has been charged with anything, because we didn't do anything wrong. And even after that thing, even after the police decided to disband the whole crowd, we stayed there. We continued working. So the violence thing and all the things that the media is saying, all the negativities, we are taking it. But the thing is, the people should decide for themselves. I mean, they have seen the whole week. We are known. We have a stigma as taxi operators. We are known as violent people and all that. But we've had a week. We've ran for a week. No one has been hit. No one has been shot.
No assaults, no
nothing.
shootings, nothing at this
Nothing.
particular point. in time.
So I think it speaks for itself.
And the pilot's till December, right? 3 months. Is it 3 months till December? Well, we maybe hope to see you then in the future. Should anything happen, I wish you success on your business. And that's all we have for this evening, folks. If you've been watching I Beg to Differ, and join us next week for more interactive debate. Till then, greetings of peace, and if you're traveling, have a safe journey home.